Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
Oh boy, we got some good stuff to talk about here today.
I can't believe it.
Really good stuff.
Some rumors.
Rumors, some...
Also known as fake news.
Some actual reports, some good questions from the audience. Lots of good stuff.
Fake news, real news, and yeah.
Before we jump in, we mentioned last week that this could possibly have been the final podcast branded underneath Dark Pixel, and that we'd be switching to the new branding. There's been a bit of a hiccup. Not a hiccup, but just the paperwork's not going through quite as quickly as I expected. So this is not going to be the final one. So we will probably have another one or two podcasts as Dark Pixel. It'll happen when it happens. Whatever. We'll let you guys know.
You'll know.
You'll know when it changes.
Yeah.
However, I made a montage. Thank you, Dude McGuy, for spending however much time you did going through and like picking out a bunch of different clips from all across our podcasts. On the final episode of the Dark Pixel podcast, we will play that montage. Till then, things are staying the same. All right, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro rumor here.
This is crazy.
Okay. We're usually late to a lot of things because...
Our podcast is in the middle of the week and news never breaks.
Time. Bad time of the week to record a podcast, especially when it comes to news. So a lot of times, it's kind of like last week tonight. He just like talks about all the stuff that happened last week. That's kind of what this podcast is. We talk about all the gaming news that happened last week. But yeah, there's been some speculation that there's going to be a new model of the Nintendo Switch releasing in 2019. A lot of people have been referring to it as the Nintendo Switch Pro. So they're likening it to an upgrade similar to the PlayStation 4 Pro or maybe like
Pro,
the Xbox One X or something like that. You know, like a mid-generation like increase in power, essentially. I'm not sure if you follow Nintendo's track record that's going to be the case. It seems more to me like this is the new Nintendo Switch, kind of like the new 3DS and the DS Lite, things of that nature.
Yeah. It is rare that they step backwards in quality, I guess. Nobody basically does that. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that it would be a handheld only version of the Switch that is not console compatible, that doesn't have a dock. It's probably a little smaller. It's like a mini version of the Switch, and that essentially would be replacing the 3DS. That's what I think. But
could be.
But people are saying it's going to be more powerful, and I'm just wondering where those rumors came from.
What would be interesting, actually, is if they didn't release a new model of the system itself, but like a new model of the dock. So like you could actually dock it and get extra power while it's docked, right? I don't know how useful that would be from a developer standpoint, because you still got to make the thing work when it's not docked. So you still have to downgrade graphics enough to get it to work in undocked mode. So if the purpose of this is to try and like, not necessarily play catch up, but just like stay close enough to the other consoles coming out to hopefully like draw Square Enix, who apparently, I mean, according to a Dreamcast guy video I watched recently, is trying to find out how to get Kingdom Hearts 3 to run on the Switch. They really want to move Kingdom Hearts 3 onto the Switch. It would probably be something that comes out after the game's released on other platforms.
Yeah, it would be like a year late or something. But
let's say that is true, and that you have developers, like big developers, AAA developers like that are trying to get their games running across all platforms, including the Switch. Maybe that is the impetus behind this decision to do a newer version of the console. I would say that that's very unlikely, and the reason I think that's unlikely,
I would too,
is because that means that like all the current Switch owners, kind of like all the people who got the 3DS like at launch or whatever, like they're kind of left out in the cold. Your early adopters, like the people who bought the PlayStation 4 Pro, right? they're not getting they're getting like enhanced graphics and stuff like that, higher resolution,
Yeah.
but it still plays all of the same games. They're not
Yeah,
getting
it's
like
not like it's getting
exclusive games
exclusive
to the
content.
PlayStation
Yeah.
4, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part that I wonder about. I just don't know if Nintendo would be willing to have that kind of a PR nightmare with people who are like, I supported this, so now I got to get this one in order to play this new game dropping. I don't see
Yeah,
that happening.
especially if it's the big games like Kingdom Hearts 3 or something, or Final Fantasy 7 Remake
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Like, if those games are only available on the next Switch, that's bad. That's
Yeah,
really
I agree.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
But
that.
I think that like even a Switch Pro or a new Switch would be so underpowered compared to the other consoles around it.
Sure.
Like it would be a new console. Like if what you're saying, this is would be my take on why what you mentioned would not be the case, is because it would be a new console. It would be so much more powerful that it would be a new console, because a more powerful Switch would still be so far behind the other consoles. I personally don't see what the point of doing that would be.
Yeah, me
And
neither.
it may be that these companies are having a hard time. You can get anything to work on almost anything these days. You can get things to work on phones that have slower, processing than the
Sure.
Switch. And so it's not an issue of that. You can always scale down. The issue, unless it's like so far behind, in which case it would be a new console iteration, that if they were going to upgrade just for that reason. I just don't buy it. If they're going to do anything, it's going to be it's going to be a Switch Mini.
Yeah, something like that. Or, I mean, I could even see it as just like a refresh. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that Nintendo had wanted to sell 20 million Switches by the end of this fiscal year or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're not quite on pace to get there. They're
Okay.
not they're almost there, but they're not quite at their projected sort of sales figures that they were hoping for. So,
Right.
like a mid console life refresh, like a new Nintendo 3DS, could be something that just incentivizes more people with like a couple more bells and whistles, like especially an XL version for people that want a bigger one, or
A bigger
maybe
one.
a smaller
I do
one,
see the draw for a bigger one.
or a smaller one that's more portable, like you're saying.
I see even more a draw for the smaller one. The Switch is big enough. It's bigger than the Vita or PS Vita. It's bigger than like any other handheld system, honestly.
But yeah, also battery life. I think releasing a new version of it that has like a longer battery life, just like a few extra like things about it that make it a little bit better than the original, that'll incentivize the people who haven't bought one yet to go out and grab one, especially if they're going to have like a new Metroid game that launches next year, and they have like a pretty solid lineup of stuff coming out next year. If that's the case, I could see that being the reason. It's just like they just want to give people a little bit of an extra incentive to go grab one that have not gotten it yet, but they don't want to alienate the people who they already have.
No, because that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
People might point out the fact that the new Nintendo 3DS had a few exclusive games on it, like Xenoblade Chronicles.
Xenoblade, and I think one of the Monster Hunters or something, right?
Yeah, but, I just don't think that that's going to be something you'll see in any sort of regularity. I think that they might do something where they have like one or two or a handful of exclusive games on a new console, but just for the most part, you don't want to do that. Because then people feel like, oh, like, why did I buy this one? Why didn't I just wait? And I just don't see that happening.
Especially so soon after. You've got to wait a few years before you do that. It would be 2 years, but I think 2 years is still a little bit on the short end.
Yeah, they might also do something like improve the screen itself. Maybe make it more vibrant or brighter, but at the same time, that would probably hurt battery life if extended battery life might be one feature they wanted to add to it.
Yeah.
I know that like the Vita, or at least the early release, the first model of the Vita had like an OLED screen, which was like freaking crazy. But then they released, I could be wrong about this, but I think they released one later on that just changed it to LED, because it's just more expensive, right? Anyways, I don't suspect that this is going to be like a PlayStation 4 versus PlayStation 4 Pro.
There would be no point. It would
something
still be
like that.
so much worse than the original PS4. A Pro Switch, like, come on.
Yeah, they could make it more ergonomic. They could make it lighter.
Yeah.
Improve the design, bells and whistles, a few things here, but I really don't see it being anything more than that. So I would assume it's the new Nintendo Switch, and that it'll just be a little bit better than what we currently have. And if you have one already, it's like whatever, just keep what you have. Unless you're me, and I always trade in my original versions and get the freaking new versions. Well,
it's funny. I know very few people that still have an original DS.
Yeah, those were not that great.
A lot of those sold, but my gosh, you trade that thing in, man, that was ugly.
The DS Lite was a huge improvement, especially the backlight. Was just, I didn't even buy the original DS model because I was just like, dude, this thing.
It was like a trapezoid. Like, that was so weird.
The DS Lite was like, that's where it was at. The DS Lite was really well made. To this day, I still feel like just the construction of the DS Lite is way better even than any of the 3DS models they've had. Like, when you snapped it open, it locked in place, and you could.
Oh yeah, that's like super satisfying.
It didn't like move at all. Like the top screen on even 3DSs, even like the newer models, if you shake it a little bit, like the hinges are a little bit loose, so there's a little bit of movement there. On the DS Lite, it was like snap, it does not move. It was just like super tight. And anyways, so I see this as being something more like that, but who knows? You know, nah, this is definitely not going to happen. But I really like. Ever since the Game Boy Advance, actually, that's another good example. They had the Game Boy Advance and then the Game Boy Advance SP, right? Yeah. And the SP was way better because, first of all, it had backlight, right? But second of all, I love, especially if you are going to use something, you're going to take it with you on the go. I love being able to close it so the screen is not exposed in my pocket.
So that it's protected,
Right. So, like, I don't know. I just don't like the idea of putting something in my pocket where the screen, even if you have a screen protector, right? I just don't like that being exposed in the pocket. I like to close it down. It would be cool if maybe they had some, even if it was a slide, just like something that goes over the top of the screen or flips or something. I would like that. I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I don't think it will. But I would like that. That would be enticing for me. Anyways. What do you guys think the new Nintendo Switch is?
What is it?
You think it's a Switch Pro? Do you think it's a Switch Slim? Do you think
Switch
it's
Mini?
Switch Lite?
Or is this completely, is this
Switch?
rumor just nothing? Is this just Switch? It's not changing?
Yeah. Anyways, if you guys were not aware of that, I'm sure you all were because it's old news by now. But that's our take on it. So we want to move on now to talking about Monolithsoft. There's a report that they are hiring.
Do you want to
They're
work
hiring for a new game. Very likely going to be a new Xenoblade game. But anyways, what I have here, I could probably switch to it so you guys can look at it at the same time, is an open letter, I guess. Not open letter, but like a staff recruitment message from Tetsuya Takahashi, who's the guy who makes all these games, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to read through it. And then there's a couple of things, well, one thing in particular that people were wanting us to comment on. But he says, so we're hiring for everything in Division 1 production. When I write it this way, people might think, did Monolith lose a bunch of people? But don't worry, we at Division 1 are doing just fine with no vacancies. Then why are you recruiting? The answer is simple. We're understaffed. The motto of Division 1 is making up its small number with great talent, which is a Japanese idiom. They have that in parentheses. That's something that won't be changing anytime soon, but there's a limit to things. In comparison to other companies with a smaller project size, we've been making games with much less staff than what you would typically see. And while this sort of structure has helped each of us with understanding each of our roles, it has also led to us not being able to check our games thoroughly enough. And when someone has to call in sick, we had to make do with other members of our staff. To give an analogy, it's like Koshin or Koshien, which is high school baseball in Japan, I guess, with only 9 players.
Okay.
Or going to the World Cup with only 11 players. When something goes awry, we had to have our shortstop also at second base, or our forward position also to cover as a midfielder. This is unacceptable if we want to provide customers with something better, so we're hiring for all parts of the division. Now, this next part is the part that the person who sent this to me wanted me to comment on. I especially want to highlight the parts of programmer, map modeler, and level designer. Obviously, programmers are at the core of any game, and I want to improve our map making, which is something Monolithsoft is already known to be good at, and build an even better world for customers to experience. Maps are at the core of role-playing games. It is most certainly not plot. Because without it, we can't do anything, but with it, we can estimate all the costs. I can definitely say that from my years on the job, and everyone here at Monolithsoft agrees. It's a very important job and thus very rewarding. You can make a game, a world. You can be at the core of Monolithsoft. Lend us your power, your talent, your creativity. We're also looking for character designers, and he goes on about, all the stuff that they're looking for. Anyways. So they're looking to increase the team size, increase the quality of the products that they're making. But I think what was interesting there was the quote where he says that map making is at the core of role-playing games, and it's most certainly not the plot. So here's the thing. If you look at this from a game designer's perspective, I actually can see this, especially for RPGs. I can see why he feels this way. Even if you go back to like tabletop RPGs, if you're a person that's ever done D&D or a person who's ever DM'd before in a tabletop, map making is actually something those people really get into. This week, I've actually been working on map making myself for the novel that I'm writing, and I've been trying to like get better at cartography and understanding plate tectonics. I was using
what makes sense to be where.
Yeah, so I used a program called G-Plates where I projected basically like my plates that I had drawn onto a sphere, and then I figured out which ones are the oceanic plates and which ones are the continental plates and how are they drifting, and then like from there like I could map exactly where the mountains should go and where islands should be and all kinds of stuff. And anyways, I thought I was going to get really good at it. I basically just did the bare necessities to understand where things should lie. I'm going to hire someone else to make a map for me because I suck as an artist, so I can't draw mountains. I can't draw lakes and forests very well. But I've got like a really good idea now. Actually, I can kind of show you guys the paper I've been working with. So I'm kind of drawing a map here, right? And I was trying to be really artistic. You can see here I was trying to like do shading on the mountains, and that just over time I cared less and less and less. And I was like, dude, this does not look right. Anyways, no, but it is really important, I think, especially in any like exploration driven RPG. Yeah. Like you really, really need to like make the maps especially at the size that Monolithsoft makes them. You got to fill that with interesting things to do. And it's like, if your plot is great, that's one thing. But it's just kind of like what happened with Breath of the Wild, right? Like you had a lot of people who were like way into exploring that world. And you had a lot of people who were like, this is empty and boring, and there's stretches of nothing to do. And so,
map making was clearly more important than plot in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
And what's funny? My understanding is that Monolith helped with Breath of the Wild in terms of map building and building the world.
Yeah. And so, anyways, as I would think that as a game designer, right, like the majority of the time spent by the team is in like building, creating assets, trying to like balance areas, make sure that they're interesting and fun, and like gameplay is, I think, understandably going to be your highest priority when you're making a video game, right?
Absolutely.
So, a lot of world building that goes into making the plot interesting and to making the setting interesting comes from thinking through and having really interesting map design. So I understand where he's coming from. I also think, though, on the flip side, that you could have really amazing world construction and map making, but for me, which I think was true, say, in Xenoblade 2. I think that the maps were freaking awesome in Xenoblade 2, as they are in Xenoblade 1. I think they're great at that. But the story just absolutely turned me off. I just had no desire to see that game through the end because I did not enjoy the delivery. I didn't enjoy the pacing of the story. I didn't enjoy a lot of things about the story. So I think that while it's fine to prioritize map making and gameplay and exploration over the plot, I still think, and he obviously knows this, I don't think he's saying that plot's not important or that you shouldn't focus.
It's just not the core.
Yeah, it's just not where you start with a game in his philosophy. And I think that that's completely fine. I have no problem with that.
Here from Mia Dietrich, very insightful, saying narrative is driven through space. You need to create the space first so that the story can be told in that space. And somebody else earlier on, see if I can give proper credit. I think Stan N, going on our podcast we had with Lore Runner, saying that so Monolith cares more about setting than plot. And that is absolutely true. So very astute observations from you guys.
And kind of like we said on that Lore Runner podcast, any one of those things can make up for the others if it's really strong, right?
Yeah,
like
any good story can be based on have either any of those at its core. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the Middle-earth stories being so setting driven that is done so well that it makes it incredibly fascinating. And even though like it doesn't have the strongest plot or the strongest characters, like the setting itself is so fascinating that it really like is the reason you're there. And I'll touch on that again in one of the other topics we have later on. But I don't have any problem with that philosophy at all. I think it's.
I don't like
totally
one word, and the fact that it was translated from Japanese. I'm trying to think of like which word it probably was going to be. It would have been. I don't like that he said it's definitely not plot.
Oh yeah,
because in English, the way that comes across, or certainly, the way that comes across is like because maps are really important. It's definitely not the plot. You know?
It seems derogatory. It
seems a little like wait. That don't put down plot so much, but likely the way he said it in Japanese was not condescending towards the plot. It was just he was saying for sure the plot can't be at the core of the types of stories that we tell, you know, like but it just comes across. If he just didn't have the word certainly, then that sentence I wouldn't have any problems with it, but that one word puts me on the defensive a little bit.
And I could see why people reacted that way, and this is why the article was sent to me in the first place, because I prioritize story so much in the games that I like, and I'm sure a lot of people who follow the channel do too, just by nature of how I talk about games and stuff. But I think that certainly you're right. It puts it. It seems in English at least that he's like definitely downplaying plot. And I would say that's probably not true, considering Takahashi's history with his plots and how much emphasis he put on plot for Xenogears and Xenosaga and other games. So I know that plot is very important to him, and that for the most part he's a good storyteller. So, but speaking about what Mia said, narrative being driven through space, that's the whole reason I started doing this week. That's the whole reason I started drawing this map, is because I got to a point where I had to explain where they're going, and I had no clear idea of like what the landscape should be and what the space is and how many miles it is, and are there rivers there? Why would they take this path? Like,
and also given the types of terrain, what kind of people would be living there is important too. So
and what's the climate? What's the weather like? Like all kinds of questions that you need to know so that when you're describing this stuff, it feels believable. So I've had to take a break from plot and writing and dialogue and figuring that all out to do this map drawing stuff, and it's extremely helpful. And it makes it so that you can reference something and then you can describe and move your plot forward through a space. So I don't know. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm cool with it.
Well, since you, like in practice, have kind of run up against that exact problem, I think that's a good educational spot. Good
anyways,
learning.
Yeah.
Learning
I
point.
wish I was a better artist. I wish I knew how to shape things better.
As long as it's in your head, though, like that's all that matters. That you
Knowing
understand it.
where the mountains are and where the lakes are and where the forests
Yeah.
are and where the cities are at and why the cities are there and why they decided
Yes.
they
The
decided to
why
settle
is
there
almost more important than the where sometimes.
helps you develop the culture of the
Yeah.
people, and it makes it so you can world build a little easier. Anyways, good topic.
Absolutely.
And I think Takahashi, he knows what he's doing. He's been in the game business for a long freaking time.
Yeah. He knows how to make good games. One more comment I want to read from Kaol saying Landon couldn't make it for the last DPG podcast. Well, this is not the last Dark
exactly
Pixel
the last one.
podcast the way that we were pretty sure it was going to be. We talked about this at the very beginning, but we will likely still do this on Tuesday, have another live podcast next week. So just for anybody who missed that, that's what's going down.
Paperwork is through the pipeline, has not completed yet, so we can't quite make our change yet. So it's fine.
But with that being said, Landon still may not be able to make it, but still, this is not the final podcast yet.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to our third our third news story. This one, man, this one's kind of crazy for me. Andrzej Sapkowski is the author of the Witcher novels, right? He is taking legal action against CD Projekt Red, or at least has threatened to. His lawyer sent I don't know what you'd call it.
A give us money or we'll sue you letter.
Yes, a letter that said
whatever the word.
We need a lot of money, and that money is, I mean, it's not a small amount. He wants $16 million in royalties due to the revenue, the huge success of the Witcher games.
Yeah.
There is some history here.
You explain this whole thing because it's kind of weird.
So, Andrzej Sapkowski is like a household name in Poland. The Witcher series is very popular there. Locally in Poland, it's a big deal. So he was already famous to a certain extent, at least in his own country, for those novels. He was approached by CD Projekt Red early 2000s to purchase a license to make a video game. There are not tons of details about exactly what that agreement was. Whether that was one game, I would think it had to have been more than one game, to make games, several games, right? But whether that the number of games it was clearly stated in that agreement, I don't really know. And I'm sure CD Projekt Red is holding that close to the chest. But they seem to be confident enough that Sapkowski has no case here because they published his lawyer's letter to them. They made that public, and so you can read that. Maybe I'll provide a link in the description to one of these articles I'm looking at, if you're interested. But there was an article released on Eurogamer back in, looks like, March of 2017, where Robert Purchase is the staff writer at Eurogamer who conducted the interview. He did an interview with Andrzej Sapkowski, and a lot of people were warning him, good luck, Robert, he's not the most pleasant person in the world. So a lot of people, I have never seen any interviews with him. I've not really read anything. I don't know the man in any capacity, so this is not personal judgment of him. This is just what I've heard other people say. But apparently, he's not like the greatest dude to hang around. He's kind of an arrogant guy, and some of his comments he's made about video games, I think, have upset a lot of players. That aside, I think his novels are brilliant. I love them, and I think he's a great author. Of course, I've not read them in Polish. I've read them in English, and whoever translated that did a freaking excellent job. Reads butter smooth in English, and I love it. But okay, this is
maybe the translator should go back and ask for a little extra cash.
I know the translator, man. But You need a couple $1 million, right?
I don't know. The book sold well here in America too. Just saying.
So I'll try my best to give a timeline here of how this all worked out. Andrzej Sapkowski does not have the highest opinion of video games. I'll read a quote from him, what he thinks about video games. But CD Projekt Red comes to him and they offer a percentage of the revenue, right? And Andrzej Sapkowski says, no way. So I'll just read this part of the article. Sapkowski and his Witcher saga were famous years before CD Projekt had anything to do with it. Indeed, CD Projekt wasn't even the first to try and make a Witcher game. The game got as far as a publisher and screenshots from this other company, but then it quietly died. CD Projekt Red came sniffing around in the early 2000s. Sapkowski doesn't remember how the conversation went, but he remembers agreeing to the game. Well, they brought a big bag of money. That's a direct quote from him. They brought a big bag of money. It was the same reason he said yes to the other guys. What I expect from an adaptation is a big bag of money. That's all. Sapkowski wouldn't say how much money changed hands, so we don't know how much that was. But at least at this time, he considered it a large sum. However, CD Projekt Red co-founder said it wasn't a huge amount of money. So they were not offering a huge amount to just buy the license outright. They were offering a percentage, but Andrzej Sapkowski thought it was enough to him. And this is where it seems to me like the reason he thought it was a big sum of money is because he didn't think there was any chance these video games would go anywhere. Right, so he thought this sum of money is going to be way more
to do nothing,
than I'll make if I just take a percentage. Sapkowski continues, I agreed they would write a completely new story using my characters, but they would create completely new stories. And I said, why not? Please, show me how good you are. Simply, he didn't think it would amount to much. He thought games were stupid. Had done ever since shooting Martians on an old console plugged into a TV. Okay, let's play cards or let's drink vodka, he said back then, but killing Martians is stupid, and my standpoint stands, it is stupid. So he has no respect for gaming as a storytelling medium. So he let CD Projekt Red do it, didn't visit, wasn't consulted, didn't care. He was Andrzej Sapkowski. Who were they? People ask me, they say, did the games help you? I say, yes, to the same extent that I helped the games. So this was his standpoint, right? He saw himself as being above CD Projekt Red at the time. And by allowing them to use his characters and his story and his world, he was helping them out, right? Which is probably true to a degree at the time, especially in Poland. It was not so that the games promote me. I promoted the games with my name and my characters. When The Witcher 1 came out in 2007, things began to change. Book publishers saw it as a way of reaching a new audience, and so republished the series with game-related images and blurbs. It muddied the waters. See, now the covers of the Witcher novels have the Witcher game-looking version of Geralt and the characters, and they look more like the games, right? So the games are what's known best, and they're selling the books more than the books are selling the games, right? So that the table has flipped here. So we start to see the mindset of the person getting upset about this. It muddied the waters, making the distinction between game and author less clear. Not a problem in Poland, where Sapkowski was a household name, but to English audiences where he wasn't published until 2008, it was effing bad for me, he says. So across the world, people think of CD Projekt Red, and they think of the video games when they think of The Witcher, and they don't think of him. And that's he does not like that.
Sell the rights to something that you made to someone else.
He does not like that.
Well, that's how the world works.
As CD Projekt Red's star rose with each game release, the problem worsened. Take a look at the covers of the English books now and see for yourself. You can imagine why someone would mistakenly ask Sapkowski if he was the guy writing books about the games, right? So reversing that. It happened.
This is only a problem if you have a huge ego. Otherwise,
Exactly.
this is like great publicity, awesome. The only thing that changed is the cover artwork. The book is still the same.
Dude.
Anyone else would be so happy.
I cannot imagine being upset at this. I mean, upset at making a dumb choice and being like, oh, what was wrong with me? But if a huge, well, at the time they weren't huge, even if it was a smaller game publisher came to me and they were like, look, we love your stories. We want to make them into video games. Of course, I'm a different generation. I grew up with video games. I respect video games. So it's very different. But the idea of someone else taking the property and it blowing up and becoming huge, I would be thrilled about that. I wouldn't be mad that people associate it with those people instead of me. I'd be like, yes, like more people will find me because, anyways, huge ego. Okay, you can imagine why someone would mistakenly ask Sapkowski if he was the guy writing books about the games. It happened, he says. It happened. I can remember my reaction. I know many bad words, and I used all of them in many languages.
This guy is just a pleasant dude to be around. Wow.
I know. He's dude. Anyways, in 20 years, he says, somebody will ask Witcher, the game, and who's the author? No one will know. Somebody, they'll say. I get the impression that it's his greatest fear. Okay, so here's the big quote. I was stupid enough to sell them rights to the whole bunch, he says. They offered me a percentage of the profits, and I said no. There will be no profit at all. Give me all my money right now, the whole amount. It was stupid. I was stupid enough to leave everything in their hands because I didn't believe in their success. But who could foresee their success? I couldn't. Okay? So there's some background on the guy's personality, his ego, and his acknowledgement of his terrible decision on his own part to sell the rights. Public declaration that I gave them the rights to the whole bunch for this lump sum of money, and I missed out, and I feel dumb for it. He's on record of saying this in public to a freaking interviewer. Now, now he's coming at them and wanting $16 million in additional royalties. CD Projekt Red has obviously said no.
Of course, yeah.
So this is all going to come down to, I mean, here's the letter from the lawyer here. In the company's opinion, the demands expressed in the notice are, this is from CD Projekt Red, sorry. Expressed in the notice are groundless with regard to their merit as well as their stipulated amount. The company had legitimately and legally acquired copyright to Mr. Andrzej Sapkowski's work insofar as it required for use in games developed by the company. All liabilities payable by the company in association therewith have been properly discharged. It is the company's will to maintain good relations with authors of works which have inspired CD Projekt Red's own creations. Consequently, the board will go to great lengths to ensure amicable resolution of this dispute. However, any such resolution must be respectful of previously expressed intents of both parties as well as existing contracts. Very reasonable. So anyways, I think it's pretty cut and dry, and I think most people would agree who have looked into this story at all, that the dude has a huge ego and he's pissed that he didn't make more money, as much money as he should or could and should have made had he just taken royalties like most people agree to with things of this nature. And now he's pissed and he's just trying to get whatever he can. And I mean, we don't know what's in that original agreement. We don't know. I mean, maybe because they've made a lot. It's not just the 3 Witcher games. They have like Gwent, which is like a whole thing, and I think they're getting ready to release like a new version of Gwent, like the card game. I know that there's a lot of stuff that CD Projekt Red has done with the property outside of just those 3 Witcher games. So I have no idea what the original agreement covered. Is it like in perpetuity, or is it just like a certain year that you no longer have the licenses, but you can make as many things about this as you want in between those years? Time period? Yeah, or is it like you have this for a certain number of games, and then beyond that, you know, you have to... I don't know. Nobody knows. It sounds to me... Forever. Yeah, like he just... Yeah, give me that money right now. Do whatever you want with this. I don't believe in your success. I don't think you guys are any good at this. And then they proved him wrong, and now he's all pissed off. So anyways, the dude is obviously just totally full of himself. I think it's pretty clear. I don't think he has any chance of getting any money from this.
No,
And
this may be a lawyer that came along and said, "Hey, if we send him a letter, maybe they'll settle in court for 1 million, or like just maybe something will happen. It's worth a try," kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which lawyers do, and it's stupid. It's like frivolous lawsuit kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, or depending on how big the guy's ego really is, it's just a way to get into.
He could take it all
public,
the way, but
well, just to get into the public with just so that people can see his name and associate it with The Witcher. Sure. You know, just
people
so that people
who are as arrogant as he sounded in that interview are totally people who would do that.
It's like I don't care about winning anything. I just care that people associate my name with those characters. That's all I want.
Exactly. More news articles, please. Yeah. It's like that sounds like Billy Mitchell, the arcade dude.
Yeah.
Like you hear him talk, and it's like, oh, dude, what an arrogant person. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
now here's another thing that Johnny Yang brought up. I'm glad you said this, Johnny. A copyright law is different across the world. So
true. There may
any limited understanding I have of American copyright law may not even apply to Polish copyright law. So maybe he does have grounds because it could work differently there. There might be different laws. In any case, here's the thing. I don't like the way the guy talks. I don't like the ego he obviously has, and I don't like his dismissal, just like complete dismissal of the potential of video games as a storytelling medium. But the dude writes good books, and I like reading those books, and I love those characters, and that's all that really matters to me. So, like, whatever, you know.
Here's if the author's got his own problems.
I don't think this will go anywhere. I think CD Projekt Red's pretty confident. Otherwise, they wouldn't have published his lawyer's letter. And so we'll see what happens. But anyways, it's crazy.
Good luck, Sapkowski.
Good luck. Good luck.
Good luck.
Nice place to segue into our big Witcher 3 topic for today.
Yeah.
So there was a big comment on our last podcast from... I think it's Pina Colada, but it could be Pina Colada. I think it's supposed to be Pina Colada, like the drink, right? Anyways, commenting on The Witcher 3's open world structure, its pacing, and whether that was detrimental to its storytelling. He actually has sent this in a couple of comments in other videos previous to this, but this is our chance to finally respond to it. So I'm going to do this without spoiling the plot of the game. It's not necessarily easy. I will have to speak in some generalities and not use like specific examples. And, you know, it's possible that the only way to really like have a satisfactory discussion about this is to use examples from the game. But I don't want to spoil the game's plot, especially since Kaysen hasn't played it.
I have not.
So I'm just going to speak in generalities, and that might not, you might want me to like point to specific examples, and maybe we could do that in a personal message or something if you want to send me a tweet or a personal message on Twitter or on Discord. Discord's a really great place to reach me. Oh, yeah. So anyways, if you're watching this, Pina Colada, and you want me to be more specific, reach out to me in a personal message. We'll keep the conversation going. But here's this comment. It's a little long, so it'll take me a second to read through it. I'd like to comment on something. This may be very important to you since you're more of an analytical type, just like me. You often say The Witcher 3's story fit into open world because it's more of an investigation type of game, trying to find Ciri. And then you mentioned the Final Fantasy X director saying that the only way to have an engaging story is for the game to be more linear. It's kind of a summation of the quote, not exact quote, but close enough. I would say that the Final Fantasy X director is right, or that what he said is true. I haven't played The Witcher 3's DLCs yet. The thing is, The Witcher 3 main story does not fit into the open world game type very well. I would have been fine if you're just tracking Ciri, but because they added in the Wild Hunt chasing after Ciri, it became a time-sensitive, urgent story. That's the first place that I want to comment on. I'll probably break this up a bit as I go through it so that I can not forget things I want to talk about. So he's saying that, if the story was just about looking for Ciri and that the Wild Hunt wasn't there also searching for her, that there wouldn't be this heightened sense of urgency that dictates move quickly, find her before the Wild Hunt does, right? I disagree with you, and I'm going to explain why using Final Fantasy VII as an example instead of like examples from The Witcher 3 itself. So yes, there is definitely higher stakes because Geralt and Yennefer are looking for Ciri, and the Wild Hunt is also looking for her at the same time. So there is a sense like we really need to find her before the Wild Hunt does, right? That increases urgency. However, it's still a needle in a haystack situation. They don't know where she is. They don't have a clue. They have just small leads to go on. And so it doesn't matter how high the urgency is. And it being time sensitive is not something I quite agree with because the Wild Hunt doesn't know and they don't know. Nobody knows where she's at. So it's a race, but it's not time sensitive. There's not like a ticking clock in the sense that, say, Final Fantasy VII has with Meteor. Like, there is a finite amount of time between which Meteor is going to be here and in which it will then crash into the planet, right? So let's say there's a matter of days before Meteor is going to crash and destroy the planet, right? You can still kind of take your time, go to the Gold Saucer, do mini games and side quests, and just like really take your time, right? And some people would say that sort of like hurts the pacing of the game a little bit. I don't think that, at least in Final Fantasy VII's case or in The Witcher 3's case, which I think are different, I think there's a distinction there. There's not like an actual ticking clock in quite the same way. So for me, both stories are strong enough to where they overcome any possible problem with, like, they definitely shouldn't be messing around with doing this or that. So I think that that's an important thing to bring up. There's no ticking clock, so it's not as time sensitive as I think you're alluding to. Okay, so this is where the pacing of the game destroys it for so many people because they want you to believe in the chase where it's urgent, but at the same time, you go into slow motion investigation story. That is born out of necessity, though. Like, what else are you going to do? You have like 2 or 3 leads where you've heard rumors, where Geralt has heard rumors that Ciri has been. So he's going there to investigate. I mean, in a story such as this, where nobody knows where she is, the only thing you can do is investigate where the rumors say she has been. So he goes to those areas looking to ask people and find out what they know, right? So it's also important to note, I think, for anyone who's read the novels, that this sort of like slow burn investigation to try and find her very much mirrors how the novels go as well. Because there's a long period of time where Ciri is missing in the novels and they're looking for her and they're in totally the wrong area of the world. And what I find very interesting about it is, like, while they're pursuing these leads, what ends up happening is that all kinds of new characters become introduced and new problems he runs into, and he has to deal with things as they come at him. Despite the fact that, yes, he's desperate to find Ciri, but he has no idea where to look. It's totally needle in a haystack, and like, he doesn't know if he's going the right direction. He doesn't know if the lead he's pursuing will give him any solid information, but it's better than doing nothing. It's better than just sitting around. So he's doing what he can with the information that's available to him, and that leads to this slow investigation, but there isn't any other way he could proceed. I mean, how can he increase the urgency? Like, you know what I mean? There's just nowhere else to go. He has to pursue what's in his hands, and that's very little. So, okay, let's get back to where you were saying here. It's kind of like if you knew your daughter is missing somewhere and someone is going after her, Would you be doing favors for so many NPCs, like finding someone else's missing daughter or saving someone else's goat from a bear? Okay, here's the key difference between what you're saying and what I complain about in Final Fantasy 15, right?
Yes,
So,
I've heard it many times.
So in Final Fantasy 15, you run errands, you do busy work as side quests. Someone's car broke down, and it's like, here's the crown prince of the freaking country coming by. I'm going to ask
Donald
him,
Trump Jr.
I'm going to ask the prince of my country to fix my car for me.
Yeah.
Or to go grocery shopping for me, or go gather stuff. It's just like, what on earth? That kind of busy work makes no sense because there's nothing in it for Noctis, right?
Yeah.
There is no two-way benefit here. He's just doing it because the guy asked him to. In the case of The Witcher, every single quest, not every single quest, I'll say the majority of the quests are about him seeking information from someone. A lot of times he has bad blood with people like Dijkstra and others who they're not eager to help Geralt out, really. He's been a thorn in their side for some time. They have this sort of love-hate relationship going on. He's skilled. They can use his skills so that they can get something they want. In return, they'll give him something he wants. Very different thing from just, I think today, instead of looking for Ciri, I'm going to go out and go grocery shopping for this woman here in Novigrad. That's not the kind of quests you get in The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3's quests tell stories. And here's, I think, something that I think is the real division between people who enjoy The Witcher stories in general, even the novels, and those who don't. And this actually goes into, I think, a little bit like why I love the Silmarillion. It's my favorite Middle-earth work. And a lot of people can't get through it.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to Kenny McLean, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And he sent me an image of the chapter in the Silmarillion, which he's going through right now, called of Bereliand and its Realms. It's an entire chapter that describes this stuff, the map.
Yeah.
Where do the kingdoms lie? Where do the mountains lie? Where are the forests, and who lives here, and who's king of this place, and all that stuff. That's the entire chapter. It's very long. Even the very first chapter, it's all about like the Ainur and the Song of Iluvatar. And I think a lot of people will read that and go like, what on earth is the point of this? This is not moving the plot forward. It's heavy, heavy exposition. I love that stuff. I love it. I love it to death because it brings such great context and helps me understand, like, when we get back into the plot, where are we? Why is this area important? Why is it strategically important? Why are they fighting over this? All of that stuff. Understanding, like, where Fingolfin's realm is in comparison to Turion. And, like, you know, Turion's over here and his city is hidden, but, like, it's actually pretty close to, like, where Morgoth is at. And you know, anyways, it's just really, really nice for me to, like, have that rich, heavy setting context. And I think that The Witcher, both the games and the novels, do a lot of that kind of setup and exposition. And in the games, it's especially done through the side quests. So the actual point of the side quest is, I'm going to help the Bloody Baron, or I'm going to help Dijkstra, or I'm going to help Triss, or I'm going to help this person because they have key information I need to find Ciri. I have no other leads. This is where I am at. I have nothing in my hands. This person has what I need. They're demanding that I help them in order to give me what I want. So his hand is forced. It's not that he's just doing it just because. He's doing it because he needs to know what to do next. So that's the key. Right. I think that's the key difference. But through those side quests, which are long, they tell additional stories about these characters' past together, about why Dandelion and is such a moron, and like why Geralt and he have this sort of like friendly relationship, even though they're totally opposite personalities. And Geralt is often just annoyed with the guy all the time because he's so stupid. You know, a lot of times they'll like kind of tell the story of like how Ciri came here and what she was doing here, kind of towards the end of the quest. But it's a very, very different situation from just, I'm just going to go do busy work for someone just because. And almost, I won't even say almost, I'll say basically every side quest, even the ones that are not specifically about finding Ciri, right? They still give very, very rich context and lore and background to the world you're in that help you understand why finding Ciri is so important, why the world is the way it is. And I think every single story there is absolutely fascinating, which I'll get into here in a minute. Okay, done with that. Let's keep moving on. I think he's talking about the goat in particular, that quest about getting the goat. He's doing that for a reason. He's not just doing it out of the kindness of his heart. He's there for a purpose. He needs information from the guy. He needs the guy to do something for him. And the guy says, go do this for me, then I'll do what you want. Okay. This is really immersion killing, and that's why the previous guest you had last week on your podcast, the Sega Junkie, he may find the pacing and the story off, even if he were to read the Witcher books. I think what you're talking about is like the specific main plot being broken up by this sort of slower pacing where we explore other things, the world and the lore and everything like that. Now, you end up bringing up Final Fantasy VII here down the line. Ironically, Final Fantasy VII's story is similar to The Witcher, being that their premise is identical. One has you going after Sephiroth, but because in Final Fantasy VII you weren't doing favors for a bunch of NPCs, you were just going after Sephiroth, and that allowed the story to continue to build upon itself. I don't entirely agree with that. I think when you learn about Sephiroth and Cloud's history in the Calm cutscene, from there, you are pursuing him, but there's Fort Condor along the way that you can stop and help some people protect a freaking like huge bird and its egg up on top of the mountain. Then you go into Junon and you help Priscilla, who's like drowning there. Then you get on the ship and then you get a scene with Sephiroth. Cool. Then you get to Costa del Sol and del Sol. From there you go through the mountain to Corel and you have a huge section of backstory on Barrett, which is totally unrelated to the main plot of finding Sephiroth. Huge chunk of story there that is a side story in the same sense that I think a lot of these stories in The Witcher are side stories. Then you go to the freaking Gold Saucer. And you can freaking mess around there and like do a bunch of stuff. And then you can go to Gongaga and you can learn more about Zack and his family. And, there's a whole scene there with Eris sort of like being upset for obvious reasons if you've played the game. And then from there you go to Cosmo Canyon. There's like another huge section of just story about Red 13's past and his father and mother and totally unrelated to finding Sephiroth. It's
funny because it's like, you need to stop what you're doing and help Red 13 like learn about himself and his life, but it's not some random person you met that you're going around, let's figure out where you came from and why you exist. Instead, it's like, hey, you're here. We're in this together. I'm going to help you out. And in return, you're going to help me because we're fighting together. So I do see a big difference there, especially with Barrett, and you're kind of helping each other instead of helping random people.
Yes. It's a very great point. I want to touch on that after I say thank you.
Later on.
After I say thank you to Carlos Blanco for the super chat.
Yes.
Are you interested in playing Gwent Thronebreaker for the story aspects? Possibly. I don't know how much time I'll have considering all the things we cover here on the channel, but I did enjoy Gwent a lot, and I think it's actually a pretty fun card game, so possibly. No, but I think what you said is key. Not a random person. This is someone in your party. And I would argue that for the most part, of course, it's not across the board, but for the most part, these stories that they're telling in The Witcher are for important characters like Triss and Yennefer. And like there's a whole side quest that resolves the last story, which is the first Witcher novel that was released, which has like it's just a collection of short stories. But one of them is about how Yennefer and Geralt met and how their destinies became kind of intertwined. And there's a whole section, a whole side story, a whole side quest in The Witcher 3 that resolves that plot. And it's just beautifully written, all of it. I find it fascinating information. These aren't boring stories to me. And I think, again, that this might come down to a a matter of taste, because I tend to like stories with really clever and witty dialogue, that have really strong like personality in the characters, and the way that they speak to each other, and the relationships they build together. And The Witcher, both the games more so than the books, but the books especially, are not action heavy. There's definitely good sections of action, but there's lots and lots of talking and lots of like just philosophy back and forth between characters who see things very differently from each other. And I find that kind of thing very engaging. I find it very, very interesting to read, and very interesting to play in the games and watch in the cutscenes and stuff. And some people, it's like, dude, this is freaking boring. All we're doing is talking. When are we going to get some action in here? So if you're the type of person who likes a higher level of action in the story, I can see why you would think The Witcher is slow. But to me, I never felt like it was slow, because I loved all that dialogue. It was so rich and well written, and just like full of context, and just like, oh, I freaking love it. Anyways, so let's see. He also says here, not to mention, if you think about the story in general, the game has you doing so many favors for so many NPCs that they all seem to be side quests. None of these quests actually build on each other. So by the time that we get to the main plot, which is Ciri and the Wild Hunt, it ends up falling flat because Ciri ends up being a Mary Sue that just somehow saves the world. Okay, I disagree with so much that you've just said. Ciri being a Mary Sue, that's one thing we can talk about. But just so happening to save the world, not the case at all. They very, very thoroughly explain her bloodline and the reason why she is able to do what she does. And often, even in the books, it's like Geralt sort of looks upon her like a daughter figure and feels he needs to protect her, but she's very capable. And she really like learns how to make her own way and stuff like that. So I just really don't see it the same way. But I also think the quests do build upon each other, and they build upon especially the stories that are introduced in the previous games and in the books. And if you've read those books, I hadn't read them the first time I played the game. I didn't feel this way. I loved every second of it. But when I had read the books and then I played again, it was like, oh my gosh, like the way they resolve these stories from the novels, I thought was just so beautiful. So I definitely don't agree with you there. And all the quests after the Bloody Baron lacks complexity and less morally gray choices as the game continues. Don't really agree with that. We'd have to get into specifics about it. You could say the game peaked at the Bloody Baron questline. That's an early game questline. It's very, very good. A lot of people really enjoy it. But I loved the stuff in Novigrad, with all of the racial tension that's going on there. And, like the church that's like sort of like trying to cleanse or purge Novigrad of non-humans and stuff like that. I love all the stuff with Dijkstra. Dijkstra's a freaking fascinating character. Super, super morally gray guy. Is he bad? Is he good? He's neither. I mean, I don't know how you could say that it lacks complexity or morally gray choices, especially with all the Dijkstra stuff going on there. Whether you should help Dijkstra, whether you shouldn't, I just don't agree. I'm sorry. Okay, here's the end of it. Time will always tell. For these reasons, Final Fantasy VII is still remembered 20 years later, and it still plays deep in our imagination. Not so if people are going to remember The Witcher 3's main storyline, like FF7. I definitely will. I actually like The Witcher 3 more than Final Fantasy VII. The Witcher 3 is my second favorite game of all time, and Final Fantasy VII is probably third or fourth. And I remember it very well. It's very distinct for me. Now, that being said, I think that the main plot of The Witcher 3 isn't as exciting as the DLCs. I think the DLCs are even better, which is just crazy, because I think The Witcher 3's main plot is good. But especially the Blood and Wine expansion, holy crap, is the story good there, especially if you've read the novels. Anyways, that is the end of my rant. Oh, one person brought something up that I forgot that I was going to say, and that is this. When you are... this is just talking about Geralt being in the slow investigation mode and not having the sense of urgency you feel he should have. Again, only working with very little information that he has. The guy still has to eat and make some money to survive. So even in the novels, when he's looking for Ciri for a long extended period of time, he's doing Witcher contracts. And a lot of things just happen to him. It's like he'll stumble into a situation and he's like, I'm a neutral person. I don't take sides. And that's his whole philosophy. But a lot of times he sort of like can't ignore the atrocities that are happening before him. And so he kind of has to get involved because he's been put into a situation and the people that are traveling with him are egging him on to do something about it. And he's just a lot of things are reactionary. They're happening to him. And so he's got to do something to get through this situation so he can get back on track. But at the same time, months and months and months of searching, you got to eat. So he's got to do Witcher contracts. He's got to, make his way in the world. And so, I don't know. That is actually the end of my rant. And I think that The Witcher 3 is freaking masterpiece and it's fantastic and I love it. I don't know if you've been following the comments or if people have said anything interesting.
I've been following a lot of the comments. People talked about a lot of different things. But, just a lot of people asking questions, a lot of interest around The Witcher, a lot of Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. And yeah, you did mention that it's his livelihood. So,
Okay. I knew this one was
saying, Wanderer saying a lot of these problems are solved with the Hearts of Stone DLC. So I don't know, did you play that?
Yep, it's great. Loved it. There's a lot of action in that one.
Do you agree that solves any issues that the original game may have had?
I didn't really have issues with the game, so
right.
I don't know. It's better. It's a better story, I think. And that's the one I think I've talked about in previous podcasts, where there was a very what seemed like a minor character in the very beginning of the game, and he has this really mysterious conversation with you, and then you don't see him again for a long time. And then he sort of just shows up and he's really important.
You talked about that. Yeah.
What the F? Because he's like he's shrouded in darkness and he's like, don't you remember me? And I remember saying out loud, no, who are you? And he steps into the light and I had to think about it for a second. I was like, oh, it's that guy from the freaking tavern at the beginning. What the F? What the F? So like it had some really cool twists like that. No, but I knew that this question was going to come up. This one comes from the Shadow Enigma. I'm surprised that Mike loves dialogue and doesn't care much for action. Okay, I didn't say that. I didn't say I didn't care much for action. I said that I find really witty and really well-written dialogue to be just as fascinating, if not more so, than action. I'm not saying I don't care about action. Action's really important. Okay, right. So just clean that up. Yet complained a lot about the beginning of Persona 4 having too much text and not enough action. Here's the difference. It's way too much text. It's way more than, say, The Witcher has.
Balance.
And so much of it I felt was superfluous. It wasn't necessary to establish the characters, to understand their background. Like, you can definitely overstay your welcome with dialogue. It's very easy to do that, to write too much. Persona 4, I think, goes overboard with how much dialogue it has. And it's not really, like, telling me, okay, let's just put it this way, right? Let's say that we want to establish in a scene that this character is really upbeat and it has a strong contrast in personality to this character. So they have a conflict between each other, right? That's essentially what you want to get across, like a little character building between the two characters, show how different they are, they butt heads a little bit. Let's just say, for instance, you can say that efficiently with a small amount of dialogue, or the right amount of dialogue, let's call it that, right. Without like going on and on and on and on and on. And like basically repetition is what it comes down to. I've talked about this in my Final Fantasy 13 discussion series, that repetition in dialogue. Now, I haven't played Persona 4 in a while, so again, I can't pull any specific examples, but it seemed like they would just sort of like drive the same points about characters kind of over and over and over. And it's like, I get it. Like, I understand. Can we move to the next place? So
I think I can modify this comment a little bit. Okay. Mike loves well-written, well-paced dialogue and doesn't care much for meaningless
action.
Meaningless action. I'm sure there are other adjectives we could put there, though. But those are important descriptors because it's not just dialogue over action, no matter what, always, forever. It's like, no. You can dialogue with like a 3-year-old for 2 hours is not preferable to any action game like Super Mario Brothers or something like that.
Sure. We got Canid Null. Did you think Xenosaga had too much dialogue too? I have not played Xenosaga. I did a first look of Xenosaga, and I played about 2 hours of it, and it was really heavy in the tutorial, but I don't remember being specifically like offended by the dialogue in any way. I don't remember thinking it was great dialogue, but I don't remember being like particularly annoyed by it or anything like that. But again, I haven't played that whole game, so I can't really speak for it. Anything else anyone else said, or should we move on?
We can move on.
I think we can move on. Okay.
I'm gonna play Witcher 3 one day, by the way. I just don't know when.
It's a big
not one that I can play with my wife. Let's just put it that way. It's one I have to play on my own.
Definitely don't play with Ruby. It's also a very long game. It's going to be like an 80-hour long thing. So I mean, it's going to take some time.
One day.
Okay. Let's move on to our last question. This one comes from Valvedrix. When you form your party in RPGs, do you usually pick them based on their usefulness, stats, and party balance, or do you prefer picking the people you like the most as characters because you either want to see more dialogue or just enjoy seeing them in your party? I've been talking for a very long time. Let's move away from me for a bit.
Well, okay, because this is something where I actually have something somewhat to say about. It's funny because when I was a kid, I would only pick the characters I liked the most, right? And at some point, maybe about 15 years ago, it was like, okay, I'm all about optimizing. And that's kind of how I've stuck that way ever since. I get the absolute optimal like character combinations and the best moves, and I try to make sure that I level up in the most efficient way. And so I very much have become like that, but I kind of regret it because there is a lot of dialogue and a lot of character interaction stuff that happens only between certain characters at certain times. And one of my examples for this would be Second Story. Ocean, Star Ocean.
Oh, Star Ocean.
Second Story. Star Ocean 2, right? In that, I remember I played the game once, and I did some stuff, and I can't remember what happened, but I think my character died. And I hadn't saved in a while, so I was like, crap. But I didn't realize that it was the kind of game where different storyline paths can happen, and you can kind of get to places multiple different ways. I was actually streaming it on Twitch at the time. It was kind of funny because I started playing, I died, I stopped streaming. I decided for my next stream, I was just going to get back to where I was, and then start streaming again from that point on. Well, I did like one thing differently, and I ended up getting a new character, watching new cutscenes, and then all sorts of things ended up happening in like a totally different way than they were supposed to. And depending on who you have with you at the time, the cutscenes and a lot of the interactions can be completely different. And so around that time, I kind of started to realize that I cared more. I was playing this game more for the story than I was necessarily just to play an RPG and have fun and kill a bunch of monsters, right? And so I've kind of started to kind of push back towards that character-driven, like the characters I care about more, putting them in. It hurts me personally because I want to be OP. I want to always have the best characters around me all the time, the most efficient, because I take level grinding and I take a lot of battles in RPGs, the turn-based system specifically. I don't really enjoy it all that much. I do it because I have to, but I don't do it because I want to. So I want those to be over as quick as possible. So I get all my characters together so that I can finish those battles super fast. And sometimes that means a character I would really like to be in my party is kind of, dropped down and taken out. And that's unfortunate, especially as games kind of from the PS1 and on, you get a lot more of that. You get a lot more of the specific interactions with only this character. And if you miss it, you miss it. Like you never actually get to see that unless you play the game again and have those same characters with you again. And there've been a few fixes to that. Like Final Fantasy IX, for instance, did the action time event, right? Where it's like, hey, you can see this or not, but you tend to miss, because if someone's not in your party, you still see what's going on with them, right? You still get to see that story. But a lot of the previous games didn't really do that. And so anyways, I personally am on the side of having characters in now, but it sucks because I want to be optimal. I want to be 100%. I want to be the best I can be. And sometimes that involves like characters I don't really like, but they're strong. So, all right, you're in.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Vitor Mello is saying. He says, I love to get characters based on the stories. So in Chrono Trigger, always when I'm in the Middle Ages, I use Frog.
Yes, that's a
Isla
good
in the
example.
prehistoric period. I kind of tend to lean that direction too. Or I will just pick the dudes I really like, and I like their design and I like their personality. At least that's traditionally what I would do when I was growing up. More or less now, I try to be more efficient, but I don't have. I'm not like a min-max guy. Like I'm not into like I'm going to experiment and spend lots of time figuring out like who is the absolute optimal character and you know especially when you get based into their stats, right? Like I remember when Final Fantasy XII the Zodiac Age came out, right? You could choose jobs for the characters. I wanted to choose their jobs based on the character design. So it's like Balthier is going to be a machinist because he has guns, right? And I'm going to make Fran into an archer. But apparently, that's a really bad idea because of Fran's base stats. She's not actually good in the archer role. She's much better in other roles. But to me, it's like, I don't care, man. She's an archer. That's the story.
The story dictates,
she's an archer. Right? So, like, generally, I tend to make choices on party and jobs based on story and character personality and background. That being said, if a character just really freaking sucks and they're just not helpful, or if there's just a very, very obvious better character, like this character is just way stronger, I'm sorry. In those sort of like extreme cases, I'll bring the more powerful guys with me. But generally, I like, again, I'm a story guy. I'm into being immersed in the story. And so I'll generally try to make decisions about party members based on, okay, what's happening in the story right now. I think that Chrono Trigger example is a really good one. If I'm in prehistoric age, Isla's in the party for sure. I'm not going to like bring friggin' Robo there. You know what I mean? If I'm in 2300 AD, Robo's in the party. If I'm in Middle Ages, Frog's in the party, that kind of thing. That's kind of like how I would generally do it. Idris's Pieces says, I remember when Mike chose his FF12, the Zodiac gave jobs based on what made canon sense rather than optimal battle design. Exactly. And that was probably a bad decision, but I was doing okay in the game, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, I did too, so.
And I think that since you can have 2 classes per character in that one, it's like you can choose their canonical class first and then like pick their optimal class second, and you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, right?
yeah.
So anyways,
that's funny.
That's all I've got for that one. Thanks for the question, Valvedrix. That's the end of our podcast today as well.
That's it.
A lot of Witcher stuff. Hopefully you guys like that.
Well, that's fine. We don't talk about The Witcher all that often, actually. So.
I love it. Oh, I am going to say this, though. This is one thing I wanted to say before talking about The Witcher, but I forgot to do it. So when we do make our switch to our new brand and everything like that, our new name and new logo and everything, I'm going to be using Twitch a lot more than we're currently using it, which is 0. So it's definitely more than that. But we've been talking about doing a book club. We're going to be working out the logistics behind exactly how it's going to work. But one thing I'd love to do is go through the entire Witcher saga, both books and games, and just kind of run through it and just like really break it down chapter by chapter, game by game, moment to moment kind of thing, and just like really analyze it deeply. That's something that I'm getting a ton of motivation to do, especially after reading this comment and kind of preparing my response for that today. And so if you guys are interested in that, in following along that what will be a very ambitious, long, almost probably year-long journey of going through all the Witcher stuff, stay tuned because I'll be doing a lot of that on Twitch. I'll probably upload some videos to YouTube, but it'll probably mostly be done on Twitch. Especially the book club part of it, where we all get together and we've all read the chapter and we're going to discuss it. That's not going to be a YouTube video. That's going to be a Twitch live stream. So if you guys are interested in following along with that, just stay tuned. I'll keep you guys. I'll keep you guys informed as to when that will happen. I also want to go through all the Middle Earth stuff almost pretty much directly after that. So Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales and The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and
that'll be a
everything else.
blast.
Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So, anyways, some cool stuff to look forward to if you're into reading, if you're into novels, especially fantasy novels, because I'm writing a fantasy novel, and I would love to get your guys' opinions on those works, which are the two I would say most influential to what I'm writing. You know, so I can get some ideas from you guys and improve my own stuff. So, okay. Thank you for watching. If you're listening audio only, come check us out on YouTube at Dark Pixel Gaming. And you guys are beasts. We'll see you again next week. Peace out.
Peace.